Right. Hello, everybody. Very good morning, good evening to all the friends in different parts of the world. We've gathered here today on another monthly satsang, which we all look forward to. Cesari ji, a few days ago, a while ago, had sent a message asking, would you want to speak about the 12 parts of Kal Niranjan in the Anurag Saga? To which uh, uh, I had told him that it's been a while since I'd read the book. It was the first time I'd read it was in the year 2019, shortly after meeting Mr. Puri ji. So, I did go through a couple of pages in the Anurag Saga, um, which, which to my surprise, uh, seemed a little different in my understanding right now compared to what I understood uh, the first time I read it. Uh, 12 parts of Kal Niranjan, or four messages or messengers of Kal in a specific chapter, in my understanding, is intended to explain to the initiates of a perfect living master the traps of Kal, and also gives instructions to the initiates, the signs of Kal in the presence of a perfect living master, and what happens when a perfect living master leaves the body. In certain specifics. To those who are not well acquainted with the Anurag Saga, it is a book written by Sant Kabir. Kabir was a 15th century. He was born in between, and the timelines vary. We believe that he's from the 13th or 14th century mystic. He's born into a Muslim household, uh, taken up initiation by a sage named Ramananda, if I'm right, and he goes on to write several poetry and several books, out of which one of it is taken up or spoken up by a lot of masters, called the Anurag Saga, which literally translates to the ocean of love. So the Anurag Saga as a book, for the first time when I read it, uh, was to me looked like any book we have, the books which we see right now. It's more or less like a dialogue where one person asks questions and the other person gives an answer, like the Bhagavad Gita, where the Arjuna is ask questions to Krishna, and it's a dialogue about various aspects. Whereas similarly in the Anurag Saga, the conversation goes back and forth between uh, Kabir Das, Sant Kabir, and his disciple Dharam Das, who eventually becomes his spiritual successor. So, we're used to this kind of dialogue in most of the books. Similarly, in the Ashtavakra Gita, it's similar with Ashtavakra and his spiritual successor. So, the first time when I read it, it was a little stark when it spoke about the Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara, the Shiva, the three aspects, in a very different light. So it was not appetizing at first, especially in the beginning, since we were born and we'd learned about religion, especially from India, as revered gods were, in a different light. So when Kabir explains about the three different aspects, it wasn't appetizing for sure. Uh, I also remember recently that Fakir Chand in his autobiography, Fakir Chand Maharaj, who is also considered a master of his time, mentioning that when his master asked him to read about the Anurag saga, he he couldn't go further because of what was spoken about the gods he grew up in, gods he grew up with. So after which he goes back to his master Shibrat Lal, and uh, his master tells him, just leave that book aside as of now, and why don't you just read the Sar Bachan and familiarize yourself with this text. So coming back to the overall contents, we wouldn't go deep into every aspect of the Anurag saga, but the Anurag saga does speak about five or six main topics. The first topic would generally speak about the story of creation or the creation of life. It would also speak about the coming of Kabir into this world and the four yugas. Four yugas are basically the Hindu depiction of the different periods of time, such as the Satya Yuga, the Treta Yuga, the Dwarpa, and the present time which we live in, the Kali Yuga. I mean, the book goes into detail about it. It also speaks about the topic right now is the 12 parts of Kal Niranjan and the story of the future. It also touches as a topic on the importance of the guru in Sant on the path, as Kabir says, and the way of living between the guru and the disciple. Now, we may ask ourselves what is Kal Niranjan, what the first time when I read it in my mind in 2019, uh, Kal would generally translate to time and space. But Kabir in his book mentions that there are certain things that cannot be spoken, but as a metaphor, as a form of creation, consider this as a story, and consider Satpurush or the creator having 16 sons in the form of a storyline, and Satpurush as a being has the fifth son named Kal Niranjan or time. He also considers the sun as a shabda or shabat, or the sound or sound current, as we may literally translate it to. So the fifth son, Kal Niranjan, then we have the sixth son being Sehaj, or which would literally translate to easy or effortless. The seventh Shabada or seventh son being Santosh, which would translate to contentment. It also speaks about Deen Dayal as one of the sons of and love. So there are 16 sons in the storyline. So what's so special about Kal Niranjan on the path? I mean, in 2019, we were always, I mean, when we initially, at least from what I understand, initially when I came onto the path as Kal Niranjan being separate from the master and all the Satguru or my master or Satpurush, I mean, it depends on the understanding. Kal Niranjan as the spiritual bad boy, and we have to overcome Kal Niranjan at all costs in a sense. So in this particular book, Kabir says Kal Niranjan, the fifth son of mine, did a penance, and the penance would mean standing on one leg on this huge ocean or the cosmic in the cosmic sense for 70 yugas, and yugas would translate to 100,000 or a few million years. So seeing this kind of devotion by Kal Niranjan, um, Satpurush, the father, was very happy and asked the son what he want, and to which Kal Niranjan was given the three worlds as we know as of now, the physical world, which the wakeful state, the astral, and the causal. And uh, so this understanding, when I was reading it for the first time in 2019, I particularly read it before or while I was heading to America to meet Master in Chicago in December 2019. So I was just browsing through the um, the book. Seemed interesting on the flight. So and when it comes to the 12 parts, it also speaks about the different forms of creation and specifically the signs. I mean, Dharam Das, in this dialogue between Dharam Das, the disciple of Kabir, and Kabir, Dharam Das asked the signs, give me the signs of Kal Niranjan in a particular sense. Uh, and I'd mentioned this before as a story or experience that I had while at the satsang in Chicago in December 2019, where um, for me it was I had an impression that everything is fine with a perfect living master, and uh, Anurag Sagar does speak about how Kal, for the lack of a better word, the bad boy or the bad the aspect where that deceives us from the path of Santnath would not be around the master or the satsang. So this particular satsang in December, the master Ishwarji finishes his morning talk, and in the afternoon, I was seated next to a fairly known old lady who happened to know Mr. Puri ji with for many years, 30, 40 years. And I was happy speaking with the lady at the time because I got to see uh, a lot of old pictures of the handsome master and him distributing sweets and a few other things. To which um, I mean, I had to believe her after listening to what she had to say and what she showed me on her phone and photographs. At some point towards, in 5 to 10 minutes when I was discussing this with her, she asked me a few questions about where you're from and what got me to America. And this was just for 3 months or 2 months after I met Master for the first time in person. So the faith was was not shaky, I would say, but at the same time, the mind does overplay. It does ask questions, even though you're initiated. I mean, this happened. I mean, this happened to me. I mean, my mind, despite meeting Mr. Ishipuri ji and being convinced that he's a PLM, me asking for initiation, it does sometimes poke you with, oh, is it really is he really a master, etc., etc., etc. So when it came to my conversation with the lady, she asked me towards the end, uh, Pranay, why do you really consider Ishoji as a master? Because I don't. I'm like, at that fraction of a second, it felt like a weight just fell on my head, and and um, I was a little taken aback. I asked her why. What do you mean? She said, I know Ishwarji's wife, and I mean they call Mr. Puri ji Ishwar. I know Ishwar's wife, and she doesn't consider Ishwar a master. I mean, do you? How can you? How can you? That was the question. And I was just looking at her for a few seconds, and for a fraction of a second after that, my my mind took me to the particular chapter in the Anurag saga where it speaks about the signs of Kal Niranjan when you as messengers of Kal, and it did check out completely with when you look at her facial features. And then I was convinced. I'm like, I'm thanking Master within, or thank you, Master, for showing this to me at this moment in time, because I could have believed her totally in terms of how easy it is to question your faith in a perfect living master. I just get up in sheer joy between lunch, have my lunch or prashad. I take out my phone and message Ishwarji saying that, narrating the story in brief, telling him that this is what happened. I spoke to so and so person, and this exactly what I just said right now. And I come back after lunch, or we all come back. We come back after lunch. We assemble in the amphitheater or the Harper College, as in Palatine, Illinois, Chicago. And Master, in his first sentence, once again speaks, reiterates about the Anurag saga, and says, if I mean he in I'm paraphrasing. He goes on to say, in the right in the beginning after the lunch break, that he recommends everybody to read the Anurag saga, the book written by Kabir. So I was convinced that, like, yeah, I mean, Master does read messages, despite some of us telling, complaining that Master does not and he doesn't reply to it. But he replied to emails or messages. But I was ecstatic after that, and that was it. So I had not looked into the Anurag saga, the book, after that, until last night or the day before. So my personal experience of the Anurag saga has at least changed from what it was before. Now, when we read about the specific chapter on the 12 parts of Karl Niranjan, there's a particular couple of sentences that caught my eye, um, where just before the chapter of the 12 messengers, where Dharam Rai in this book, or Karl Niranjan as he's also known, he's given many names out of given many names. So Dharam Rai tells Kabir, in he says, "Listen, Kabir, in your name I will maintain the path, and in this way I will defeat the souls." Karl speaks to Kabir and goes on to say that my essence, that is, my Karl says, my essence, or the Mrityu Anda, will go into your home and will bear the name. Accept the request which I am making again and again, having faith in you. So this is the request that Karl Niranjan places in front of Kabir, in this case, my master, and says, I need to your request to set out these paths to deceive the souls. To which Kabir then, in the dialogue between Kabir and Dharam Das, his disciple, Kabir's disciple, says, I gave him the permission. I told Dharam Rai, Karl, that I give him the permission. For the sake you have laid out your traps, and after giving him the promise, I then come into this world. So this stood out when I read it last night, because this had the permission of both the stamp of the Satpurush, in a sense. I mean, it goes on to say that everything, a leaf does not move, for a lack of a better word. Nothing moves in this world or any world without the permission of a PLM, or without the knowledge of a PLM. So everything is in his will. So in a way, it is the promise, the 12 parts or the uh, four messengers which go hand in hand in this particular book, specifically speaks about the 12 parts. And there's another line which Kabir says, in your mind, be ready to discriminate. So while this is very important, discrimination, I guess over the last 1 year or 2 years, Zairi had mentioned, I mean, about using your critical faculty of your mind. I mean, it's easy to speak and put everything on the master and blame, tell him that, oh, if everything goes well, this is the master's doing. If it doesn't go well, it's also the master's doing. And it's like an insurance policy where uh, all the decisions you take, you put it on the head of the master. I mean, in a sense, it's true from one way of looking at it. But Kabir, even though this book was written ages ago, speaks about the duty of the initiate. Even despite the initiate having a perfect living master who's still alive, or once the master passes on or leaves the body, to discriminate and be ready in your mind. So this is very significant, and I wouldn't go to explain the different messengers of Kal and 12 or 4 messengers in detail, but in an overview, the very first, he speaks about the Mrityu Anda Doot. The Doot would literally translate to a messenger in Indian language. Kabir says the messenger who has been incarnated in your home. So Kabir tells Dharam Das. Dharam Das is, as we all know, later on or in the book, that Dharam Das is Kabir's spiritual successor. Spiritual successor and the family member are two different things, as explained by Kabir in this book. So he says the first messenger will be incarnated in your home. He will be very painful for the souls. Again and again, I am cautioning you. This is very significant because time and again we've had these questions within our own mind when we see things happening from what the past masters and even the present. Kabir at some point also tells Dharam Das very specifically that even if your son or my son were to, by his latent powers, Kabir says, even if by my son's latent powers were to enliven a man who's dead, please understand that the son is still a messenger of Kal. So, I mean, he's being very specific when he says something like that. And I mean, this actually stood out when in a couple of sentences. So what do they actually mean about this? And I mean, he also goes on to say, Dharam Das, even your son Narayan, consider him Narayan Das as a messenger of Kal. So being I mean, the other parts of Kal, Niranjan, as the messengers of Kal would go on to. He says there are messengers who speaks about the scriptures and the Vedas and the Quran, and will say that theirs is the only path. There's a particular messenger, as Kabir Das tells Dharam Das, that they will establish the knowledge of the Brahm or the cosmic plane, and to which the souls who are involved in rites and rituals will be attracted to. So he goes on to explain the attraction of what kind of initiates actually listen to and would fall for these kind of traps. He also goes on to explain there would be a messenger where they speak about the forehead or the sun and the moon cycles, the astrology, and I mean, astrology as a science has been there for many, many years. And even today, there are different offshoots of astrology or the sciences. I mean, it can deal with uh, tarot card reading, if what they speak about. I mean, they go hand in hand, but they speak about the cycles, etc. So Kabir Das is very specific. He also speaks about the trap by the messenger of Kal, he will speak about true things, the sun and the moon. He'll spread the path of astrology. Also, a different messenger of Kal, Niranjan, would borrow scriptures from different, or knowledge from different scriptures and different mystics, and would call them their own. So he will, I mean, he to be specific, Kabir says he will go on and say that the master has given me the root mantra and has told me to do this, this, this. And this kind of messenger specifically will keep the incarnations, in this case the initiates, disturbed. This will make the initiates disturbed. We see this in some offshoots where we've noticed when a master has left his body that they speak about, hey, master's told me so and so that I'll be doing this, 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 and speaks about the scriptures or the books written or borrowed from here and there, and said this is what this person said, this is what this person said, and this is what I have speaking from my own experience, etc., etc. There is this particular professor. I'm not wrong. He speaks about religion and especially on Sant Mat, and he's written several books out of California. He's written books on the formation of cults, and if anyone's interested, should look up on that, and we'd probably get an idea as to how several paths, including the ones we see on Sant Mat, have come from this basic principle of borrowed scriptures and knowledge from different scriptures. And these messengers or these following have millions and millions of people. So I mean, so we need to come to our own understanding. No one can do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves, of course, in confiding with the master that we have been initiated with, as the only friend that we can go to. Kabir says toward the end, and I'm not going through all the messengers, but he also speaks about the messenger of Kal will set many traps, and looking at which the souls will be attracted. So this is a never-ending cycle. I'm taken aback by the relevance of some of it even today. So in a sense, very specifically, we are going about the spiritual successor. The spiritual successor here, Kabir specifically calls it the son of Nard, or Nard son, or the word incarnate. So I mean, in the same chapter, just after the four messengers of Kal, Kabir says, the messengers of Kal will not affect the soul who will be with the Nard and the word incarnate. I mean, in the sense, I mean, if you put two and two together, Nard would basically mean the primordial sound, or the primary Shabad, or the master from the highest state of consciousness or totality of consciousness. And the word incarnate would generally mean the spiritual successor, the successor who carries the Nard, or the lack of a better word, the power of Namdan. So it is fairly, is it a test that everyone has to go through? I mean, I'm not the right person to answer this question, but we like to believe that everybody on the path comes under some sort of a spiritual testing, or spiritual understanding about their own interpretation of what the path is and what their goal is in terms of pure spirituality, or the pursuit of the truth. Each one has a different interpretation of the sort. The soul Kabir says, the soul who knows the essence of the Nard and who recognizes signs of the word incarnate will be spared. So that goes hand in hand. So from what my understanding of what I read about Anurag Sagar 3 years ago in 2019, 3 to 4 years ago, has has changed. But now, right now, Nick can speak up just after this. But I mean, how can my understanding right now would generally mean how can Carl Niranjan, I mean, we call him the bad boy or the bad guy, be so different from or apart from Satpurush himself, because the 16 sons, uh, as as my early understanding of Satpurush as a being, as a physical being, the mind creates images images of imagination, is not a being because it's a sound current. Um, it's one of the sound currents of the 16 sound currents of the primordial or Satpurush, as we want to mention. And all of this, even what we read right now, is at present a reflection of our consciousness at that point in time or this point in time. When we read a book right now, it would mean, or what we understand from it would be totally different from what we may understand it if we read it once again 5 years from now. But the 16 sound currents, Ashabads, and all of these stories which we hear about the creation is a metaphor. Uh, is is explained in such a way that the mind can understand, um, in an essence, and would all stories which speak about the dialogue, etc., is spoken either in a dialogue or in a story form. So, I mean, as my master Ishwarji had spoken very highly of it, I would, even though it's not appetizing in the beginning, uh, I would really recommend everybody to read the book, The Anurag Saga by some Kabir.